Welcome to our morning show studios on WRCO Radio. I don't think Tony Kurtz or Todd Novak have ever seen me move that fast.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Bad hip and all. Do you see that? That was a quick first step for me. So, Todd Novak is here, representative of the 51st Assembly District, and Tony Kurtz, 41st Assembly District, our guest here today in the morning show studios. After a tough start, we're ready to roll here today.
It's a rough crowd, isn't it?
It is. Speaking of fast, Tony, I saw you. You were at the Rodeo Dairy Days parade, and your car turned the corner, and you had to catch up. You've still got some hops on you there.
No, I'll tell you, that was a wonderful parade. Everybody was in a great mood. It was a beautiful day, and I just appreciate all the people that came out. And yeah, I had to catch up. There was a lot of great people, and to your point, you and I were talking off the air. A lot of great activities afterwards, and the fire department. I know State Farm, Julie Caron's agency had a Bucky Badger there, and a lot of great food was eaten and by all.
And speaking of which, Todd, you've been kind of a real go-getter for these dairy breakfasts in your area, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I laughed. Tony said he had to catch up. That's the way I deal with him at the Capitol too. He's always trying to catch up.
He's got a quick first step.
Yeah, there you go. I just had my last one. Iowa, my district changed, so I did Lafayette and Grant. I was not available for the Iowa one, and huge turnouts to both. It was really nice to see everybody, and worked with Representative Tranel in Grant County. We served together, and then this weekend was Lafayette, so it's very nice. Yeah, I really enjoy that, and I think it makes a difference too, because there's a few years they don't hold them on the farm. I don't know about here, but when they're on a farm, they really bring out a lot more people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. Hard to find those farms to put them on, though.
Well, yeah, this last year Lafayette had to skip their dairy breakfast because, as aggy as they are, a lot of farmers just don't want to deal with it because they're busy and stuff. So they didn't have one last year because they couldn't find a farmer to host it. So it was nice that they could this year.
Well, so it's kind of back to work. You got a few things to work on now, Tony, as you head back here into the month of June, don't you?
Well, this is budget season, and so we are hot and heavy in the budget process. We've had several meetings already. We'll continue to have meetings until the end of the month. The goal is still to get the budget done by the 1st of July, and just everybody know we are on a 2-year budget cycle. It ends on the 30th of June, and then new budget will start on the 1st of July. It's not like the federal government. If for some reason the governor doesn't sign a budget on the 1st of July, we just operate from the previous budget. But we do need a budget. Schools need to know what funding they're going to get. County highway departments, county departments need to know what they're going to get for the upcoming budget because they all have some increases, especially when you look at the shared revenue, because they get a cut now of the state sales tax increase. And so those are the type of things that we're going through right now. And once again, we'll get done very shortly.
So making a lot of news, Todd, in terms of things that are kind of gleaned from the governor's budget proposal and everything. What's the latest? What have you heard?
Well, yeah, you can't believe everything you read in the news. Sorry, Phil, but it's a little, I think right now there's a misconception that we have because the media and everybody keeps putting out we have all this money, $4.1 or $2 billion, and we truly don't. Surplus. We've only got the cost to continue current programs and everything. I don't know. Tony knows. Tony's on JFC. He can get into the figures. So you're still trying to thread a needle to get everything. I think out here, my concern or my push is with our schools. I've got 14 school districts in my assembly district, and every single one of them except one has declining enrollment, steep declining enrollments, which is really affecting their per pupil aids. So I'm in constant contact with them, and and you got a split government, which isn't always the worst. You've got to work with the governor, and we've had talks before, and it kind of broke off. And hopefully June 30th is the deadline, so we're having a lot of meetings. Tony's having really a lot of meetings, but hopefully we can get there. But the positive thing about the state of Wisconsin, if we don't have a budget by June 30th, it still continues on the last budget. So it's just different pieces to put together.
Tony, could you talk about some of the numbers?
Well, to Todd's point, our state is financially, we're doing very well. We're in very great financial state. But the problem is, to Todd's point, when you look at what the cost to continue on is, so what a cost to continue is basically just like all your listeners. You have your bills that come in, and maybe certain things went up. Your maybe insurance, maybe your homeowners, your car insurance, all those things went up. So that is kind of your cost to continue moving forward. Well, the state has the same thing. We have cost to continue with our insurance. We have bills that we passed last session that we have guaranteed that we're going to fund in this upcoming budget. We have, like I mentioned, shared revenue. That's like that right there is $68 million more that are going to communities because they're getting an increase in sales tax. So our cost to continue this budget is a lot more than it was last budget. And I'll give you another example. Part of that cost to continue is Medicaid, particularly for nursing homes. As our population ages, more and more people are going into nursing homes, and at a certain point, Medicaid actually picks up that cost. Well, that was a really big increase, and to be very fair with everybody listening to it, that's only going to get worse as, once again, our population gets older, more and more people are going to need that service. So our cost to continue is roughly around $2.2 billion is what we estimate for the upcoming budget, and what we estimate we're going to bring in is about $1.8 billion. So right off the bat, we're already about $400 million in a hole. Now, to Todd's point, and we've talked about this, and everybody has heard about the $4 billion surplus. The issue is the $4 billion surplus, which we have, which we're very fortunate to have, that is what we consider the vast majority of that is one-time money. And I think when I mentioned this to everybody about how during COVID, the federal government gave the state of Wisconsin, when I say gave communities, gave individuals through stimulus checks, school districts, everybody got a lot of federal money, and that was roughly around $65 billion. And if you look at those years, 2022, 2023, and of course the tail end of 2024, people spent that money, and the state collected sales tax on all that. So that's kind of why we have such a large surplus. Over the last several budgets, we've used a lot of that surplus for one-time things. We've paid for buildings, we've paid for roads, and I think you'll continue to see that in this budget. And so as we're putting the budget together, we just have to be very careful. We don't want to create a structural deficit. We can have a little bit of structural deficit, but we don't want to have a massive structural deficit that's going to lead us into, June of 2027 when the next budget cycle comes in. So that's one of the things we're working on right now. I don't worry about this budget as much as I worry about the next budget, because once again, the $4 billion surplus, that's something we can kind of lean on and make some key investments. To Todd's point, I have 18 school districts that our beautiful assembly district actually touches, and I know special eds is a big point of emphasis. It's been a big point of emphasis for Todd and I. Last week, we did vote on an increase in special education. I'm going to be brutally honest. I wish that was more. And I think that's something that Todd and I, we're not done yet. I'll put it that way. We're not done with the budget process, and I think that's something that I'd like to revisit that, to be very honest with you, and see if we can get that up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, special education has been a hot topic, Todd.
Yeah, and that's where my emphasis is right now, and I agree with Tony. We're pushing very hard. That's where the biggest bang for our buck in our rural districts would be is if we got more money into special education. And you have to remember that due to a Supreme Court ruling with the governor's veto, the schools are automatically going to be able to get $325 per student more for the next 400 years per year. So that's going to cause probably a property tax increase. So I would like to see the state money go back into special ed and things like that. I know that right now we pay around 30% of special education costs. They kind of worked out last week, 35% the first year, 37.5% the next year. I still think that's too low personally, and I'd like to revisit that and get anywhere from 40 to 50%. But yeah, it's moving. And I always tell people when I talk about the budget, what I tell you today changes tomorrow a lot, and it does, because it's a lot of negotiation. And we not only have to negotiate with the governor, but as assemblymen, we have to negotiate with the Senate. So everybody's got to be on the same page. It's quite a tedious task, and I credit Tony for hours of meetings on the JFC and stuff. A committee I would never want to be on, but so we will get there. Tony and I are both fighting for more for our rural schools. So,
and for school officials, Todd, too. Talking about the budget. Maybe if it doesn't go by July 1st, it gets pushed back. But it's hard for officials to kind of get their budget plans for the next few years.
Yeah, it actually is, and I think that's a concern right now. Schools are working on because they're trimming down and they're trying to figure out how they're going to do things. And I know the longest since I've been in office, it got us. I think it was 2016. We passed it 2016 or 18. We passed a budget in September. It went that long, and schools were really freaking out, and so were local governments because back then we did shared revenue different. But so they really need to know soon what they're going to get. I will say, as we were talking about the budget. Surplus we have, it is nice. When I first was elected in 2014, the state was still coming out of the recession of 08 and 010. We had hardly any money to work with. So I've been in budgets where we have no money and you're really moving things around, and where we got a little wiggle room in this one, but it's interesting.
Concerning schools too, I know there have been some grants recently for youth apprenticeship. I mean, that's a big thing this day and age, a big part of local education.
Well, and last week we actually voted to increase the youth apprenticeship program, pretty drastic. And to your point, that is something incredibly popular, especially in our area. I'm very proud about how our school districts are partnering with a lot of local business, like even Little Waniwak, beautiful Little Waniwak. They got a partnership with Hillsboro Equipment where they got some students doing apprenticeship programs with them, and so basically we just help fund that program, and that is something that I think with the workforce shortage is get more people into the trades. I think that's a great message and a win-win for everybody.
I want to get back to something, Todd, that you mentioned, and you're a former newspaper man, the media, and how you see it, from your standpoint, because you deal with local media and small town media, but you deal with statewide media as well.
I would say that was the biggest shock to me when I first got elected, because I was editor of the Dodgeville Chronicle for 25 years. And I'm fortunate because I have 8 weekly papers in my assembly district. So, and I still love to read them, and the coverage is a little different. But when you get into the Madison media network or media, where this district is and stuff, it's a whole different perspective. A little frustrating at times. For example, last week. The portrayal was, as I watched the news and read the state papers, we didn't go to special ed up to what the governor wanted, but we did increase it. We increased it several percent, but we didn't go as high as the governor wanted. Therefore, in the media's portrayal and my friends on the other side of the aisle, that's a cut. Well, if you're not there to begin with, it's really an increase, but they portrayed it as a cut. And this is what we deal with all the time. We give more money, but if it isn't what they think we should give or what the governor had put in his budget, then therefore it's a cut. Well, this is really not a cut. Even though Tony and I aren't happy where special ed is right now, it's still more than they were getting, but it's being portrayed as a cut. Mm-hmm. And I will note that also a lot of Governor Evers had total control over billions of dollars of COVID money, and he created all these new programs, and that money is now run out and come. And in order for us to, if we wanted to continue a lot of his programs, we got to use state money because he used federal money, and we just can't afford it. And so therefore, it's portrayed as, we're cutting. Well, that really wasn't state money to begin with. That's the problem with these programs is once you start them, it's really hard to message why. And I know that we both get contacted about this Child Care Counts program. That was all federal money that the governor created, and we both support helping parents and afford child care, but there's different ways to do it through tax cuts and credits and stuff, where if we continue child care counts, you're talking $600 million a year, just a year. So it's things like that that's kind of hard, that frustrates me at the national level. That's why I think it's important, and I spend a lot of time in my district talking to people. But I'm not sure what part of that gets through to people. I think talking to them, if they've got a question, means more than them reading the paper.
Yeah, there's a mistrust, I think, a little bit, with the media, especially the state, and maybe there's a good reason.
No, and I would agree with Todd. It's just the way they portray things. And I guess what just does frustrate me is there's programs, to Todd's point, that once again, I mentioned earlier about the $65 billion is what came from the federal government, and Richland County got money, Sauk County, the city of Richland Center got money, school districts got money. All this federal money came down, and to Todd's point, the governor got about $2.5 billion of federal money, and the issue is. And why you see a lot of people saying, "Oh, we're out of money, we're running out of money," is some folks and some municipalities and some programs that the governor started actually were funded by federal money. And once again, that federal money was one-time money. It's just like a lot of your listeners maybe got a stimulus check from the federal government during COVID. Okay, I was at a meeting the other day and I asked people to raise their hand. And a lot of people raised their hand, and I asked them, "Okay, did you get that stimulus check again, or did you get them every quarter? Did you get them every month?" No, you didn't. You got them once. It was one-time money, and I think that's the thing that we need to try to emphasize more. Is a lot of this stuff, a lot of the reasons, there's this massive need for money. Unfortunately, is I think a lot of people built that federal money into their base budgets, and now that money's running out, and of course now they're looking at the state to backfill that. And to Todd's point, yes, we've got this $4 billion surplus. But that's once again, that's one-time money, and so you're not going to see us. It's going to help us ease into certain things, but we're not going to bake that into our cost to continue, because that would be, when you look out budget-wise, that would be very foolish on our part to do that.
Okay. We'll have more from Todd Novak and Tony Kurtz coming up when the morning show continues. Todd Novak is our guest today, 51st Assembly District, and Tony Kurtz representing the 41st Assembly District here on WRCO's Morning Show. Tony, certainly horrendous news from over the weekend in Minnesota, and that concerns everybody, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, right? No,
and I think, we were talking off air before we went back on, and I think it's something we collectively as a nation, we need to do a better job of just bringing down the rhetoric, because there is, our for Todd and I, our heart goes out to we have members that knew her very well, the young, and they're pretty devastated, and there's just there's no words that can explain what happened, and we just need to get back to more. It's funny, people. We just need to treat people the way we want to be treated, and unfortunately, I think people, they take to social media, or they make these signs, and they just they're just over the top with their comments and their rhetoric and just the hate, and we just need to. I hope. I believe Todd and I and others, we try to set a good example. We were very careful about the words we use and how we talk to one another. I think we just got to get a lot of better job of that nationally.
It is a scary situation for anybody that works or serves in the public, though, Todd.
Yeah, and it gives you pause. Obviously, as I was saying before we were off the air, but obviously this man was mentally unstable, but something set him off. And I agree. I get a lot, and I'm sure Tony does, some very nasty emails and Facebook posts and stuff. And people really need to really back off that, because stuff like that sets somebody off, like this guy. And this is what happened. You look at what happened, and then you go back. The governor of Pennsylvania's almost died because somebody firebombed his house. We had two Jewish young couples gunned down in the streets. We had that CEO of the healthcare company, and this just this last year. I think it's kind of scary. I don't live in that world. I try to get along with everybody. I'm pretty bipartisan. My colleagues, I get along with both sides of the aisle, as Tony does too. I just think sometimes people really need to think, and you see that sometimes trickle down to the local level too. I was in local government for so long that sometimes people just need to watch what they say. You can disagree without being hateful and make your point. That's what I always tell people.
Obviously, it's a case of mental illness, Tony, and there are a lot of programs. You can get more programs, but a lot of times, if somebody is, how do you catch them? They're not necessarily willing to get help or think they have a problem.
There's no, we've been, as a society, we've been, unfortunately, we've seen this get worse. Not better. I think we've realized we do have a significant issue, but how do you address it? There's so many things. To your point, somebody actually has to want to get help, and to your point, something set them off, and that's something that will be debated for years to come. But it's just a matter of fact. Our society. You and I've actually talked about this before, Phil, about. Society in general over the last several decades has changed, and unfortunately, it's not for the better. And I can't, I don't think we can pinpoint it. I think there's a lot of factors that play into that. But we need to get back to basics, just treating one another the way we want to be treated, and once again, we got to lead by example. If you're somebody that gets on Facebook and just wants to bash somebody else on Facebook and be a jerk, and then in public you're all giddy and happy, well, you're part of the problem, in my humble opinion.
Todd?
I just think that too. Back in my social media it's good and it's bad. Social media has become such a detriment. I think COVID really messed things, people up. The lockdowns and everything else was not, probably looking back, was the right thing to do. And I think people got isolated. They really got hooked on social media. And I think when you're relying on social media for your information or Twitter or whatever, that's where the problem is. People just don't talk to each other anymore. I'm fortunate in my office. My constituents are always calling with questions and stuff. So, and I'm around, but people just need to get back to talking to each other. And this is, I don't know what'll change. It's kind of scary to me, to Tony's point of when he said decades back. What's the future going to look like 20 years from now? Compared to now even. So I just don't know.
It's this way, I don't want to digress, but you go back to the dairy breakfast. In Smith Farms, over 5,000 people came to that dairy breakfast, and to see how many people stayed and just talked at the tables, that to me is something that at least reassures me that, in rural communities, I think we value that, sitting across from one another and talking and visiting.
Yeah, people look out for each other in rural communities too.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Absolutely.
It's a whole different environment. It's something that Tony and I and Travis Tranel, and we talk about Madison. There's different parts of the state, like the southeast corridor is a whole different environment. It's like over here, it's just totally different life.
Mm-hmm. I always say it's, we can't relate to them, they can't relate to us. It kind of goes both ways, doesn't it?
Right, it does. So I wouldn't live anywhere else but here. It's just, I personally, as a representative, I shouldn't say this, but I feel safe just because of where I live and the area I live in. Not when I'm in Madison, not always, but, out here I do. I can go up to anybody or anything.
What about when you are having listening sessions? What usually comes up, Todd? What's the most common question?
Well, in my district, it's schools. That's the hard part about listening sessions too, is because the opposition is organized to attend your listening sessions. So you go to a listening session, and then there's almost 99% of everybody there wants to scream and holler at you with talking points they were given, which is fine. But the budget process, the schools were, and also another problem in my area is windmills and solar farms. So that's always a huge topic. But I don't get hit up on federal stuff now. Right now, people are asking for me to have more listening sessions, and they want my opinion on the federal bill, big bill. And I have never in my term under three presidents, Democrat and Republican, weighed in on federal issues, really at that level, just simply because there's nothing I can do about it. And as I said before, as the state, what I tell you today changes tomorrow. We don't know what they're going to pass. So, I mean, there's a lot of people worked up in a frenzy about a lot of things. And like I said, I go back to the groups. There's so many different groups out there that are organized and get these. I mean, this whole weekend protest, and I think protests are great as long as they're peaceful. That didn't just happen overnight. That's been organized and it's paid for and stuff. And there's a lot of that with different advocacy groups and stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we talked about that off the air, but you had kind of made that point too, that not everybody was probably local at some of the protests either, Tony.
Well, and every community had one. I mean, I know there's one here in Richland Center. Obviously there was one in Reedsburg, and that's everybody's right to do that. But once again, I kind of go back to, the rhetoric. You look at some of the signs that were being displayed and some of the messages that they were trying to emphasize. That once again, that doesn't help with the current situation of the violence and different things that are going on. Because if you want to dial down some of the signs, and to be fair, both sides do this. Let's be honest. Republicans like Todd and I, we can be. Some of our folks on our side can be as guilty as well. It's just we need to be a little bit more thoughtful. I was telling you the other day, there was some up in Reedsburg. There was a vehicle that had some certain anti-President Trump propaganda on the back, and that's fine. But it was very, very inappropriate because of what they were. I won't say it on air what it was, but it just goes to the point that we were talking about earlier. Is this we really, really do need to dial down some of the rhetoric that's on both sides. So.
Do you hear a lot about, this is a federal issue, but Medicaid, obviously, that comes up?
No, that is. I mean, especially, you and I have talked about this before. You look at Richland County, you look at Juneau County, you look at Sauk County. Juneau County is about 28% receive Medicaid. About in Richland, it's roughly around 27, I believe. So those are things that we look at, but, to Todd's point, that's something that's kind of out of our control. We have, trust me, we have emphasized that to our federal delegation about, just be very cautious about what you do, and of course we will look at that at the federal level. Department of Health Services is coming up in the near future. That was something that we're going to be taking up on the Joint Finance. We have a lot of things on tomorrow that we're going to be take up, like the UW, like corrections, like the Public Service Commission. Those are the type of agencies. But then the big ones, of course, is going to be transportation. It's going to be health services. Those are type of things that we're all going to be focusing on the next couple of things. But once again, we can't really control what they're doing at the federal level. We just have to kind of watch and be very cautious of it.
Todd?
Yeah, and back to Medicaid, because I do get a lot of questions, and I understand it, because I'm on the ADRC board for Iowa County, ADRC board, and the regional ADRC board. So, and I've dealt with being a court-appointed guardian for the elderly for years. So I know the system and everything. But I don't think what people realize is, and this is what I tell people, easy explanation. First of all, they haven't cut anything yet. But also, every state is allowed to add on X, Y, and Z to their Medicaid. And Wisconsin has been frugal on that over the years. So when they're talking cuts, for example, and not to be political, but kind of is, one of the things the feds want to do is cut off Medicaid for illegal immigrants. Wisconsin doesn't offer it for illegal immigrants. I mean, that's something we don't offer. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, the work requirement, do we have that on there? Or is that welfare?
No,
yeah. So that would be new, that people have to, if they're able-bodied, they're not elderly, they have to work 80 hours a month. So when they're talking all these cuts and these huge hits, some states will, because they've added on all these extra Medicaid benefits. We, as a state, haven't, under both Democrats and Republicans. So, yes, there will be some changes, but we'll see what happens.
What about workforce shortage? That's a common topic each and every time we talk, I think.
Yeah, I mean, unemployment's, Southwest Wisconsin, our area, Tony and I represent, we have the lowest unemployment in the state of Wisconsin. I was just actually at the dairy breakfast Saturday talking to a couple of my cheesemakers, and, those kind of jobs are at a premium. Man, they really need help. And you can walk into a cheese factory anywhere in my district right now and start out at $25 an hour and not know anything. So those are the kind of jobs where I'm seeing the real big need. And I think even I'm talking to some quick trip managers, they're even were used to be the gold standard to work. They're even struggling a little bit. But I don't know where all these people went after COVID, because there's a lot of people didn't re-enter the workforce after COVID, and a lot of students didn't go back to school. So it's Senator Markline and I talk about that all the time. Where did these people go? And people are not having kids anymore. It used to be you were 15, 16 years old, you go work at the local grocery store and help out and do things like that. So there isn't many kids doing that. So I'm not sure what the answer is. My concern is, and to tell you the truth, I was just telling this Saturday to the cheesemakers, they're going more to automation. So they're spending that money in 5-10 years. They won't need hardly any employees, and that to me is very concerning. Simply because then where are people going to work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very true.
Workforce is something. I mean, I got a letter the other day from a business and just outside of Elroy. That was their whole topic about workforce, about trying to find people. And the other issue we have is the work requirements. I mean, there really should be. I mean, if you're going to get some type of federal benefits, there should be. And if you're able-bodied, you should be able to, because the jobs are out there. And it's interesting. What does frustrate some business owners is they will get some job applicants. They will get 4 or 5 or 6 for a job, and they're very happy if they get that many. A lot of times they might only get one, but then the individuals don't show up, and because now they have checked the box to continue to get their benefits. That is a problem, because an employer spends the time to advertise, spends the time to actually interview somebody, and then expects that individual to show up, and they don't. Or they do show up and then they don't accept the job, or the job might not be just perfect for them. That is an issue. I mean, and it's not being negative against people. It's just that is an issue. And the labor participation rate, in other words, to Todd's point, those folks that maybe they're not getting any type of benefits, but they've kind of left the workforce, that actually has kicked up. So people are slowly getting back into the workforce because we have plenty of jobs. And to Todd's point, they're pretty. I mean, you go drive through here, you see what Schreiber and some other businesses are offering. So the jobs are there, the pay is there. It's just we do need to get a little bit more people in the workforce. But to Todd's point, we don't have the folks like we had 10, 20 years ago. Declining birth rates. I mean, we've talked about that many times before, Phil. That is an issue about how do you get more and more people and really to incentivize people to come to rural areas.
In the ag industry too, lots of things are more mechanical than they used to be. And,
where we had the dairy breakfast in Sauk County, the Olden Farms, they have robotic milkers. I mean, that you're seeing a lot more automation, which is great. And to Todd's point, there might be more automation in the cheese industry, but those are going to require. There's still going to be some folks because they're going to have to work on the equipment. They're going to program the equipment, so they're going to be better paying jobs, and they're going to need some type of technical expertise at one of our wonderful technical colleges, or in some fields like the medical field. Obviously, we're going to need those folks to go and get a 4-year degree and maybe even continue further.
What are some priorities now as you look at the summer here, Todd? What's up next on your agenda and schedule?
Well, I'm pretty much Madison, 2-3 days a week. We have a lot of meetings and stuff, and tomorrow we're in session. And besides that, I'm out in the district, and Travis Strandl and I just did a train ride. We're working on I got a whole bunch of new with my new district. I got a lot of railroad. So Travis and I are working the line from Prairie du Chien to almost Madison, or at least Spring Green area, needs to be upgraded. So we're working with the state on that and the railroad company. So we actually took a train ride from United Co-op in Boscoville to Riverdale Ag in Muscadet about a month ago, and we had a blast. That's pretty interesting, but I don't think people were. So that's something I've really gotten into because I didn't realize the amount. Like we're talking tens, 100 million bushels of grain go across that line every day, or not every day, every year, and it's a very widely. It's huge out here. So that's my favorite project that I'm working on so far. So I've been working with the railroads, and then just do normal on days and I'm not in Madison. I've got this morning, and then I'll be out talking to some constituent stuff, and that's the fun part of this job.
Sure. What about you, Tony? What's on the schedule?
It's all about the budget. Between now and the beginning of July, it's all about getting the budget crafted and living within our means, but also making some pretty key investments, like Todd talked about, more for schools, more for a lot of communities. I know I mentioned about health services coming up. That's something that Todd and I are pretty passionate about, is helping more of our ADRCs. We got a little increase in the budget last session for them, but I think they do great work, and something we talked about earlier about our aging population. The need is there for their services, so that's something like we're going to be working on. But trying to get a little, farming in on the side.
Oh, that's funny. I gotta tell everybody. He hasn't got his corn planted yet.
No, I got that.
You don't?
No, my corn is actually looking really nice. Like I said, you and I talked off the air. We've actually, we could use a little window for making some hay, but, we've had some really nice rains. We haven't, knock on wood, we haven't had that massive, 2 inches an hour rain. We've had some really nice gentle rains. We could use some heat, and I guess we're going to get it.
Yeah, this week. And it'd be nice if commodity prices are a little better. But it's so far growing season is off to a pretty decent start, I think. When you're out there riding the tractor, are you crunching numbers from the budget in your head, or how does that?
So I do organic, and so I got to cultivate. And so yesterday I sat on the cultivator for a good 8 hours, because I think you guys had rain. We did not have rain up in Waniwak. But you solve a lot of problems sitting there on the tractor.
I bet you do. Sometimes the whole budget thing is like slamming your head against the wall, though, I'm sure, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, there is for both of us. So. Yeah. But no, there's a lot going on, and that's the thing. You and I have talked about this stuff before, and I know you talked about, Todd, about listening sessions, and we go around the listening sessions. One thing I do enjoy about the listening sessions when we have them is how people will bring up a topic, and other people around the room may have never heard about that before. And so they actually learn about different things as well. And I think that's, to me, especially when you do the budget listening sessions, you have all these people that are asking for millions and millions of dollars, and I think it gives people a perspective to see all the different needs in our state. Like I mentioned, ADRCs, or it could be schools, or it could be child advocacy centers, or it could be needs for homeless shelters, or food banks, or what have you, fire departments. It's just interesting how people can hear. They think their topic is the most important in the world, but yet when they actually hear from others and they realize, holy smoke, there's a lot more out there that also needs funding and resources.
Another thing we didn't talk about is like a shortage of housing too. That's another hot
housing. Just to recap. So last budget we did put $525 million in a program to help housing, and fortunately they finally got that program done about what the rules are, and so you're going to see more and more of that in the next couple of years get pushed out. 30% of that money is supposed to go to rural areas, and I think that's good. It's just one thing that is frustrating, and I don't want to put words in Todd's mouth, but it is getting frustrating. Some of these, we'll put these laws into place, and it's taken some of these agencies 18 months to get the program set up and money out the door. Like last budget, we did it's called an opportunity fund. It's basically to attract attractions around the country and things like that. So the draft, that was one of the things we put money in to try to get the draft. We got the draft, and obviously it was a big success, but a lot of that money's not getting out the door to attract these events and other programs. So it's a little frustrating. You put money in the budget, but you had to take some of the money that's not even out the door in this budget cycle. So
wonderful. Todd, anything else you want to add?
No, just to the housing thing. It is a concern, and I'm on the WIDA board, and I've been on there for about 6 years, and I represent the state assembly. When I first got on the board, the focus was on Milwaukee and housing and big city housing, and Senator Romaine Quinn, who represents up north, is on the board too with me, and we really, really pushed for rural projects, and now we're starting to see fruition across the state. There's money out there that we've set aside to help people with housing, but then again, you talk to the prices of houses are starting to sit a little longer than they were. They're not going for over asking, and talking to the banks. There's kind of this pause right now. So I don't think it's as bad as it was a couple years ago, but there's still a shortage. But I think too, you talk to a lot of people. Just average rent is $1,200-$1,300 a month. That's like my house payment or more than my house payment. So I mean, it's not, housing isn't cheap no matter what you do anymore. So.
Yeah, very true. Thanks for your info today, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Guys,
Thank you. It's good to see you. It's always good to see Tony.
Yeah, good. You'll see him again quicker than you'll see me.
Yeah, I vary too quick. That's a problem.
Yeah. You'll be back later in the summer, though. And Tony, you'll be back next month, too. So
I will. Thank you, Phil, and everybody have a great day.
Yep. Tony Kurtz joining us, Wisconsin 41st Assembly District Representative, and Todd Novak representing District 51. And we are glad to have you along for the morning show. We'll have more coming up tomorrow.